On the left-hand side, you should see a recording icon. Okay, go ahead and put click pause.
Welcome everybody to this last-minute debate on my part. But anyway, we have two distinguished guests, which are pretty much well known on Facebook and Asana's channel, The Same God, and The Cross and the Crescent with Chris Claus. Today's debate is going to be, is there evidence for the biblical Exodus? Did it actually happen? The format is going to be two 10-minute opening statements, up to 5-minute rebuttals, and 30-minute opening or 30-minute open discussion, and 5 minutes for closing statements. I'm going to be having my timer here. I believe Chris Claus says he's going to go first. I'm going to start the time as soon as you guys begin to start talking. Chris is taking the affirmative. So, Chris, when you're ready to go, start talking, and I'll start your time.
One second, Dale. The topic needs to be restated. It's not whether it happened or not. It's whether it can be proven with minus having.
That's what evidence is.
No. What I'm saying is, I said I believed it. I said that it can only be believed through faith, not through evidence. That's what
right.
I said.
Okay, and the debate is there evidence, not simply faith, but is there evidence that the biblical Exodus actually happened?
Outside. In other words, outside faith, you can prove it outside faith.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
yes, sir.
There we go. Okay, I'll accept that.
Okay,
right.
So I guess if evidence can be provided for one's faith, then Chris Claus will be providing that information, and I take it that Asana is going to try to counter that. So, other than that, we'll get started, and Chris, take your first 10-minute opening statements. I'll start your time as soon as you begin to talk.
Yeah, thank you very much, DL, and just go ahead and mute your mic, Asana, just so we don't hear any background. So, good afternoon to everyone here, and everyone who will be listening to the debate later on YouTube. My name is Chris Claus, and I am involved with the group called Cross and the Crescent. If you would like to look into the work that we are doing, you can search us up at thecrossandthecrescent.com or on YouTube at youtube.com/crossandcrescent.com. So today's debate will be about the Exodus, if there's actual evidence for the Exodus. While everyone is listening to the debate, I want you all to leave all preconceived notions that you may have about the Exodus. I feel if one listens to the debate with an open mind and no bias, I am sure they will clearly see an abundance of evidence no one has bothered to look at. So before I get into my positive argument for the Exodus, I would just like to point out that one's faith cannot be blind. One's faith must be supported with evidence. If a person purely believes in everything without any type of evidence, this person has blind faith, and I would call upon them to come to the true Christ, where they do not have to worry about blind faith. Also, if my opponent asserts that the Exodus could not have happened, he is then claiming his God was wrong. So let's listen to today to see if Asana will throw his God under the bus to try to win a conversation. If he does, I would recommend other Muslims to be very leery of this gentleman. When we talk about evidence for the Exodus, I want to be clear, I'm not arguing that there is archaeological evidence found during the time of Ramses, because as scholarship and archaeology shows, there is zero evidence at that time frame. My argument today is that before Ramses, roughly 400 years, the Exodus happened. So my arguments today will be based upon the physical evidence and not the time frame. If someone would like to debate the time frame, I would be more willing to have that conversation. So I'll display the evidence in 6 different categories proving the biblical Exodus actually happened. Part number 1 will be showing the new Semitic arrival. 2 is the mass multiplication. 3, which is the slavery. 4, which is the judgment of Egypt, 5, which is the mass exodus of the Israelites, and 6, the conquest. So the first piece of evidence is the new Semitic arrival. And of course, in the land of Goshen, an archaeological site called Avaris was discovered, where they dug up evidence of a Semitic-style house and also a palace fit for royalty. There was a tomb found as well, and in the tomb, a Semitic statue of a person, a statue of a Semitic person with in high authority. Now, Charles Ayling, an Egyptologist, explains the statue as having a mushroom-type haircut, and the statue also had a throw stick over his shoulder, and it had remnants of a multicolored coat, meaning that it was believed that this tomb was the tomb of Joseph and the multicolored coat, which would make sense from the biblical account, which is said to say, "And King Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has shown you all of this, there is no other man as wise as you. I will appoint you to do this work and to rule over the land of Egypt. All of the people shall be under you. Only the throne of Egypt I will be above you." And Pharaoh took from his hand the ring which he held as a seal, put it on Joseph's hand so that he could sign for the king and seal in the king's place. So we know that Joseph had a lot of power within the Egyptian realm. So it would make sense to see this type of admiration towards Joseph at that time, which gives indication of the people that were there. Now, the new Semitic arrival and the multiplication, I'm going to try to go together on this, because God has told the Israelites to multiply exceedingly. So when archaeologists dug up more in the Egyptian delta, around the same places of Varus, they found a virgin land that was inhabited with Semitic people. Now, scholars say it started off with about 12 houses and expanded within a few generations to be a very productive city. Now, the graves have been dug up there, and in the graves they have found pottery, weapons, and sometimes donkeys were even buried with the people. And all scholars agree this was not an Egyptian practice and points to Semitic traditions, which gives evidence that the Semitic people were in the land of Goshen, as the Bible says. Now, there is a ton more evidence, but due to time restraints from my opponent, I have to have I will be brief with my explanations. Now, slavery. For slavery of the Israelites in Egypt, I will be bringing up two pieces of evidence. One would be the graves and how the bones and age of the people were identified. Also, a papyrus with the Semitic names as slaves on it. So when they dug up, they also found after there was a great multiplication, there was a period of grief and poverty. The bones had Harris lines, meaning that they were malnutritious, and they were dying between the ages of 32 and 34. The only possible theory of why this is because of slavery. Also, there was something found. There was graves of babies. It is exceedingly more than any other time in history. And what they did is compare the adult bones to the child bones, and through their analysis, they were able to identify that there was 60% more women that died later in age, which would mean the majority of the babies that were dying were of the male gender. I just want to point this out because we do see in the biblical Exodus is that the male newborn babies were being killed at the time of Moses. And then also, the last piece of evidence that would be the Brooklyn Papyrus, which in this papyrus from the exact time we are talking about identifies 70% of the names that are Semitic, names that look like they are straight from the Bible. Example, Shiphrah, which was a Hebrew midwife in the story of the Exodus. That name is in the papyrus from that time. Now, the judgment of Egypt. The evidence for the judgment can be found in the papyrus called Admonitions of an Egyptian Sage by Ipawer. In this papyrus, it is described in the following, and this is just I'm just going to do quotes from the papyrus. It says, "Behold, Egypt is falling to the pouring of water. He who pours the water on the ground seizes the mighty in misery." Next quote, "The river is blood. If you drink of it, you lose your humanity and thirst for water." Next one, "Gone is the barley of abundance. Food supplies are uninsured. The nobles hunger and suffer. Those who had shelter are in the dark of the storm.
2 minutes.
Behold, the plague sweeps the land. Blood is everywhere, with no shortage of the dead. He who buries his brother in the ground is everywhere. Woe is the grief at this time. Wailing throughout the land, mingled with lamentations." This identically describes the judgment upon Egypt. Now, of course, there's the Exodus and the conquest. I'm hoping I get to them both. But now for the Exodus, from Egypt, this is probably going to be the shortest part because we have two simple pieces of evidence. And I believe it is not huge, but when added together with everything else, it shows a much bigger picture. There's 2 sites dug up in Egypt, and in those findings, they identified bodies that were not properly buried. And it seems like they were thrown together in a hurry. There was also bodies on top of bodies, and legs were intertwined. They also found 2 areas, one called Kahun and another Semitic area, where there was people of Semitic background. And then it was like overnight, both places were empty, and there was no more remains of the Semitic people. Archaeologists believed whoever lived there left immediately, almost like it was overnight. So I'm going to skip the conquest and just do my conclusion. So basically, when we put all this together, we see a statue of a Semitic person with a high position in Egypt, the statue who identified closely to the biblical Joseph. Then we have the Great Multiplication, where all archaeologists have found evidence of a small place of Semitic people within a few generations, where a great city. The evidence from them being Semitic would be the pottery, the weapons, and being buried with the donkeys. The slavery evidence is the sudden deaths of the 32 to 34-year-olds from malnutrition, followed by the papyrus from the same time identifying Hebrew names as slaves. The judgment of Egypt has been found in the letter of Ippaware, where he identifies the calamities Egypt closely to the Bible descriptions.
Time.
Excellent.
All righty. That concludes Chris Claus's opening statement. Asana, when you're ready. Just a second, folks. Asana, you have 5 seconds to give an opening statement.
5 seconds?
I'm playing with you. I had enough of you last night. Okay. You got 10 minutes for your opening statement. If you want to be like Chris Claus and give some information on how you can be contacted and what your page is about, you're welcome to do that as well. Okay. So as soon as you start talking, I'm going to start your time.
Okay. Well, the group is the Same God group. It's been there for years. Anybody who wants to go and join and talk and discuss, that's fine. We believe that, well, I won't say all our members believe, but it is my belief that we all believe in the same God, even though we have different perspectives on God. So my opponent, which I don't really like that word, but he is my opponent in the conversation. And as you can see, he actually spent 10 minutes not giving evidence of an exodus. What he did do, he told some things about maybe they're slaves different places, which no one denies. Also, he made many comments about, just different things that had nothing to do with the Exodus. When we talk about the Exodus, the reason why I said you have to have faith to believe in the Exodus is the mere fact that what we're talking about is the transportation of over 1 to 2 million people who crossed the Red Sea in a single day. Now, keep in mind, the Red Sea is about, let's say, 2,000 feet deep, which means that basically they'll be like going down a mountain of that level, then crossing over around 7 miles wide, and then climbing up a mountain with 2 million people, elderly, cattle, all wagons, goods, all that sort of thing. Then crossing the desert to, let's just say, to Mount Sinai. That's a lot of ground. That's a lot of people. Like I said, over 2 million people with all their wearers and people. What I'm saying is there is no evidence, literally, and no Egyptian history. Out of all Egyptian history, there's no such history of such a people and such an en masse group of people going that distance with that amount of people. And also in Egyptian history, there's no a pharaoh chasing this group and drowning or anything. Now, I do believe in the Exodus. I do believe. My wife came home at the wrong time. The dog is going crazy. Honey, I'm doing a talk. So anyway, okay. So what we have is there's not a trace. I mean, when they go through that whole idea of, even in the Red Sea, there's no chariot wheels, there's no potteries, there's no anything on that route of that distance. Now we're talking about, this is so poignant, that we're talking about probably 2 million people, according to the Bible, 2 million people, 600,000 military men and their families. So I would think, I mean, as far as historically speaking, Egyptian has tons and tons of hieroglyphics and so forth and so forth. But if I ask someone, hey, what's the evidence of the Egyptians? You can say, hey, you can look at the pyramids, right? Or if I said, what's the evidence of the pyramids? You can just say, here's the pyramids. Okay, so we're not talking about the evidence of was there Israelites. We're not even talking about evidence of were people enslaved. We're not talking about evidence of did people live in certain places. What we're talking about is an evidence of 2 million people going from one place to the other. And I'm saying that with faith, we can believe that. We can certainly believe that because the faith of knowing with God things are possible, and perhaps it might not even be exactly how it's envisioned in the Bible. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but we will believe that by faith. We can't just say, like he said, there was one town, someplace they had one body, or they found 2 bodies. Remember, when you're talking about the Exodus, you're also talking about the day of the Exodus. We're talking about not just Semitic children being buried. We're talking about who knows how many thousands or even millions, or definitely thousands of Egyptian firstborn that was all supposed to be buried, because they all would have died from the death. My opponent didn't touch upon the thousands or whatever deaths of the firstborn of the Egyptians. He did talk about some Semitic children being in graves, but that still has nothing to do with the Exodus, actually. So that in itself is a very weird, position that he's taken. So he really hasn't even talked about the Exodus, which is what this is about. Now, yes, once again, let's make it clear. I actually do believe in the Exodus. My position was, we believe these things because of faith. And here's another good point. Out of anyone that's watching now, when most of the people that will be watching this would have never actually investigated the Exodus. They would have said, I read it in the Bible, I believe the Bible, and I have faith in it. How many people actually read the Bible and say, wow, because for you to even to go investigate it would mean you doubted the Bible, right? You would have to actually be reading next and goes, this doesn't, I need to get some research to see if this is true, which means you doubted the Bible to begin with. Most people don't do that. Most people who study or read the Bible, they believe the Bible because of what the Bible says, and they already have faith enough to actually even believe in the Bible. Most beliefs are like that. It's like when I tell people about the resurrection, there's no way to prove it. There's absolutely no way possible to prove the resurrection, especially because Jesus didn't stick around and basically talk to people like his enemies and so forth, where they could have said, hey, we remember you were dead, now you're alive. So that is something a person has to take on faith. 100% faith. I don't know why my opponent has something against faith. It's really his whole religion is based upon faith. But then when we talk about the Exodus, he's actually saying, I can prove to you or give you some culpable evidence of over 2 million people crossing the desert through a open river that's been opened up for them, and he has evidence for that. He hasn't given any evidence for that. First of all, I would like, when his turn, that he could even give evidence that is even possible for over 2 million people to cross over that distance and that depth within 6 hours, because it happened in that same day. They left at a certain time, and by the next day, it says the very next day, they were already passed over through the sea. That which is technically not only just improbable, but technically impossible. It would take days, if not even months, to actually go down the depth of a sea and then walk across it. And remember, and it's dark. It's not even like it's daytime. It's dark, and they got to go through rocks. It's muddy. They got to do all this stuff, and then they got to come back up on the other side of all this. In the meantime, days and weeks would have been passing by. They would have needed fresh water. They would have needed to feed their cattle. They would have needed to sleep. 6 hours? I don't think so. Now, if we say we believe it by faith, that's great. That's fine. But if my opponent could show me even the viability, the feasibility, or the viability of 2 million people crossing over this amount of space, 2,000 meters low, and about, I would say, 7 miles wide at the narrowest.
2 minutes.
And 2 million people doing that. And then, like I said, going back up about another mountain high, about 2,000 feet, with cattle, elderly, babies, everything, I would be quite amazed. But he won't be able to do it, and he can't do it. I'm done. I'm done.
Okay, so Asana, you had a remaining of a minute and 31 seconds. Were we going to allow people to add that to their rebuttals, or?
Yeah, you can add it to my
Okay.
rebuttal.
All right, so we're at the next stage, and it looks like we're dealing with 5-minute rebuttals. Chris, when you're ready, you can start, and I'll start your time. Just give me just 1 second. As soon as you start talking, I'll start your time.
Excellent. Thank you very much again, DL, for moderating the debate. And apparently Asana has no idea what evidence actually is. So in this debate, Asana assumes that I must supply the evidence that he wants, or there's no evidence for the Exodus, which is completely bogus. And now the Exodus is not just simply the people leaving Egypt, and that is done and over with. The Exodus is a lot more than that, and it goes right to the conquest of Jericho and the surrounding cities. It's the whole story, not just a little minuscule part of the story. Now, I want to address some of the things that he actually did say, because I think they're really illogical. He said that faith apparently needs no evidence, and just everybody simply just reads the Bible and they just simply believe it. And now, if you actually look for evidence of what the Bible says, then you're denying and rejecting the Bible. You don't think it's truthful. That's why you're looking. This is what Asana says, which is completely inaccurate. And what he's doing is he's trying to say that the only way that people should look at faith is in circular logic. So if we read a book, then that book must be true because that book says that it's true. That, sir, is the pure definition of circular logic. I don't subscribe to that, and it's a logical fallacy, and I would hope that you don't subscribe to it, even though I've caught you using it once before. Now, when we get into what I am going to do is I'm going to present the last part of my thing because I didn't get to it. So the conquest, because there is nothing that he actually said. So the best evidence for the conquest is the archaeological dig of Jericho. What is interesting is that Jericho was described in archaeological findings just as we see in the Bible. In the Jericho findings revealed that Jericho was highly fortified with ramparts and high walls. When Jericho was destroyed, the scholars have said that the walls came down and the city was conquered very quickly. The reason they came to that conclusion is because the food and the grain that were in the houses were still there and almost full. They said that if the war would have lasted up to a month or even longer or a few weeks, then the food would have been dwindled or almost gone. But they don't find that at all. Also, the Bible says that Jericho burned, and the archaeological evidence finds that Jericho was burned. And to top it all off, the Bible says that Arab, who received a promise, would be safe, and there is a piece of the wall with a house behind it, and it had no damage to it at all. And that part of the wall did not fall, but that was the only part that did not fall. So it gives indication that the story of Jericho from the Bible is definitely true. So again, going over the evidence, as I brought out the new Semitic arrival, I showed that they multiplied. I showed the slavery. I showed the judgment and everything. Now, Asana says that I didn't talk about the deaths of the Egyptian babies, but that just shows you how much he actually listens to what I said. Now, when you go to the letter of Ippaware, which is the admonitions of an Egyptian sage, there it shows that there was actually these type of things. Because in the Bible it says that there was wailing throughout the lands because of the newborns that had died, right? And here it says, behold the plagues sweep the land, blood is everywhere with no shortage of the dead. He who buries his brother in the ground is everywhere. Woe is the grief at this time, wailing throughout the land mingled with lamentations. So again, the Egyptian sage is actually identifying the deaths of these people and the
1 minute.
and the children and whatnot. Just the only thing Asana's doing is just saying, oh, no, that's not evidence. But the problem is that when we look into this, there is no, before I get into this, Asana says that there's no evidence for anything in the Red Sea. What he's doing now is he's throwing Islam under the bus because they actually believe that they have the mummy of the Pharaoh from the Exodus that was pulled out of the Red Sea and is supposed to be the Pharaoh of the Exodus. So now you're throwing them under the bus as well. I hate to see you keep doing that, Asana. You might want to look into your own religion before you keep putting your foot in your mouth. So as I said, I've gave evidence from all abouts of the Exodus part, right from the start to the finish, right to the conquest. Asana seems to think that I need to show that they climb these big mountains, which he hasn't actually proved a case that that was the actual travel that they went on. So Asana's just assuming all these type of things without showing evidence. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Chris. Let me get my timer together here. Appreciate that rebuttal. Asana, you're up next. And as soon as you start, I'll start your time.
Okay, so as we see, once again, my opponent really did not address the Exodus. What he did was he had plenty of evidence, or if you want to call it evidence, about Jericho, which we're not talking about. And Jericho has nothing to do with the Exodus whatsoever. But yeah, okay, so yeah, since we're not talking about Jericho, that is not sufficient for this conversation. Now, when he talks about this Egyptian sage talking about something and woe to the land and stuff, I asked him about Egyptian babies. He said, well, there's a lot of things going on, babies and whatnot. No, we're talking about the actual death of, like I said, en masse of children en masse being dead, Egyptian dead. That is not in Egyptian history. In fact, folks, none of this is in Egyptian history. Now, he says something very interesting when I talked about the Red Sea and finding out the Red Sea, and he talked about the Pharaoh mummy in the Quran saying that. Now, keep in mind that I said from the beginning, I believe on faith because it said that's what happened, completely on faith. Then he talked about, well, anybody who has blind faith, well, that just doesn't make any sense. But Christianity is based on blind faith that Jesus was resurrected. They have not one. If he, in his next rebuttal, if he can prove the resurrection of Christ, I will convert. I will literally convert right now in front of you all, because the resurrection cannot be proven. There was nothing to verify it. And only thing that one could say is, well, the Bible says it. So they would have to believe it on faith. Jesus didn't go to Pilate or to people and say, hey, look, you tried to kill me and I'm not dead, right? And Jesus doesn't talk to people today, well, not in the flesh. I mean, somebody could say they're having some spiritual experience with Jesus, which is based on faith. It's all faith-based. Once you try to put faith aside and said, what is faith? In fact, I would like for Chris, when he comes back, to say, what is the definition of faith? What is the definition of faith? And you know what? The definition of faith has nothing to do with evidence. It's what? The substance of what? Okay. I would like for him to finish that sentence, and I'm done. You can yield my time to my balance. TL.
Wow. You are not using up all your time, which is good.
Yeah.
I wish you took that approach last night on the phone.
Oh, okay. Yield my time. Yield my time. Add it to my balance, please.
Yeah. Oh, so you want to add it to the balance? Okay. So we got
both of those.
So we got a minute and 31, and then you got 2:31.
Okay.
All right. Well, listen, fellas. I know this next stage is 30-minute open discussion. I'm thinking maybe you guys can break that up into 5 questions apiece.
How does open discussion work? I thought that meant the crowd gets to ask questions.
Oh, is that what it meant? I thought it was an open discussion between the two of you.
I don't really know. I didn't set the rules. Chris did.
It's just an open discussion between me and Asana. So yeah, I'll come up with 5-6 questions.
But
Come up with 5-6 questions. We can just talk about it.
However, DL, though, that doesn't really make for much sense, because now after we did these presentations, for us to ask the questions back and forth to each other, I don't know, it seems like it's cluttery. Because what I mean, that's just more rebuttal. I'm saying that's just more rebuttaling. So if he talks and I talk, that means we're going to start just over talking each other, and it doesn't seem to be. It seems like it's going to fall apart. Maybe the people.
That's one of the reasons why I said maybe you guys can ask about 3 to 5 questions apiece.
Or maybe the people who's on. Maybe the people who are that are watching. Wait, what is that? Maybe the people who are watching should ask us questions, 3 to 5, like you said. Somebody asked them a question, somebody asked me a question.
That's after our conclusions, Asana. If they want to ask questions after that, they can. I know that you've never had a formal debate, but this is how formal debates happen.
I have, but they
Asana.
Different ways.
You have like a cross-examination over the opening statements and the rebuttal, so we can get clarification.
What I'm saying, how's that going to be controlled?
Well,
between me and you, I ask questions, you answer.
So how long
when
are
it's
you
your
going to
turn,
have
you ask questions, I answer.
That's what I was gonna say. The person that's asking the question has a minute to answer the question, ask the question, and the person being asked the question has 2 minutes to answer the question.
Okay, that sounds good. I like that.
All right. Sound good with you, Chris?
Because that's 3 times 5 is 15. That's 15 and 15 is 30. That sounds good to me.
Wow, I didn't even know it came out that way, and I wasn't very good at math. So glory to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. So, all right. So the first, who wants to go first?
I'll ask Asana. I'll ask Asana some questions first, then he can ask me after.
Okay. So you got a minute for your first question. Asana, you got 2 minutes to answer.
Yeah, Asana. So the first question that I would ask you is, what do you consider evidence?
That was the question? I would consider evidence something tangible that we can use to say something is or isn't a certain way.
Okay, second question would be, would you accept archaeological evidence as evidence?
Yes.
Why are you denying all of the archaeological evidence that I've supplied to show the biblical Exodus?
Because it wasn't pertaining to the Exodus.
That's not true, though, Asana. You're assuming that the Exodus is just the crossing of the Red Sea. That's not the Exodus, and I've told you that over and over. It goes right from the start, right from Joseph all the way to the
What,
conquest. The whole
DL, why are
thing
you allowing
is the
this?
Exodus.
DL, you're allowing something
So
that's not
can you
permitted.
explain why you're, I have a
DL.
minute. I have a
Okay.
minute, Asana.
No,
Don't I?
What you did was you asked me
I'm-
3 questions in a row. I answered them, and then you actually answered back.
No,
I didn't give you a question.
I have documented the 3 questions that he asked, but
right. And so on the third time when I answered, he was allowed to actually rebut the answer I gave, which
I
is
am
not a question
rebutting
and
and
answer.
following that up with another
what I'm
question,
saying,
which would be question 4.
the reason why I allowed for you guys to go back and forth is because altogether there's 3 minutes for a discussion.
No. What I'm asking is if somebody asks me a question and then I have 2 minutes to answer the question, if I don't take the 2 minutes or not, it's my option, right? So I'm saying that means they ask a question, I give an answer. They ask a question, I give an answer. They don't. It's
Okay.
not. It shouldn't be allowed. That I'm saying that I asked a question.
I'll tell you what. The person who
What?
answers the question who gets 2 minutes, if you answer it in like 10, 20 seconds and you still got, another minute and, 40 seconds or whatever, you can determine whether or not you want to allow the other person to ask a follow-up question.
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying if they ask a question, I give an answer. That should be the end of it. They ask a question, I give an answer.
Asana,
They can't. I'm saying they can't.
How many
They can't
moderated
turn it into
debates
an
have you
argument.
had?
DL.
This is gonna be a quick session because
How many moderated debates have you had, Asana?
The DL.
None, right? Then quit telling me what we're supposed to be doing.
Okay, hang on. So Chris, you have 2 more questions.
Is this the way it's going to go? Is I'm just going to simply ask a question, he's just going to flop it off on the side and not answer it?
No, I have the right to answer it.
You didn't answer my last question.
Okay, what was the last question?
Why did he ignore the archaeological evidence of the Exodus? And he said, I didn't.
Exactly, that was my answer.
But you did. And now you assume that I can't give a rebuttal to it. But the problem is that I can, because I actually gave evidence for the Exodus when it's the whole thing.
What is
you
the
assume
definition
the
of
Exodus is just the leaving of
What is
Egypt,
the
and that's
definition
not
of
the
Exodus?
case. So
What is the definition
therefore,
of
I'm
Exodus?
asking you, why did you completely disregard all the archaeological evidence that I provided?
I did not consider any of that evidence for the Exodus. So that's my answer. Can we go on? DL, it's up to you.
No. Go ahead.
I'm giving up my time. I'm giving up my time, Asana. You go ahead and start your questions, because this debate's pretty much over. Because you are not being truthful at all.
DL.
No, it's your turn. He gave up his last 2 questions, so which is going to mean that there's still a lot of time that's going to be left in this.
So my first question is, what is the definition of the Exodus? What defines the Exodus?
Is that your first question?
Yes, sir.
The Exodus is defined from Joseph all the way through to the destruction of Jericho, the conquest. Everything in between. Go ahead.
Okay. What do you call the actual gathering and leaving of the Israelites to the Mount Sinai? What do you call that?
It's part of the Exodus. Go ahead.
Okay. So it would be fair to say, or I'm asking you, is it fair to say that if I am defining the Exodus, or if I am talking about the period of the gathering of the Israelites and them leaving Egypt to Mount Sinai, would it be fair to say that you have provided no evidence for that?
Yeah, I don't care what you assume the Exodus is. I go with the majority view of scholarship of what the Exodus is, not your minuscule view of what you want to look at. You're not an authority. You've gave no argument, no criterion, nothing at all. So sorry, just you saying something to me is not plausible and is not accurate. Go ahead, next question.
Okay, fair enough. So to rephrase that question, do you believe you gave any evidence in regards to the Israelites leaving Egypt and arriving at Mount Sinai? Do you believe you gave any evidence for that period of time?
I don't believe I have to, and I did give evidence of the Israelites, the Semitic people, leaving Egypt overnight, especially that's what the archaeologists have said, and that was, I know that you didn't listen to my opening statement, but Harun, and there was another site by Havaris that had a bunch of Semitic people in it, and it looked like when they had left, they had thrown the bodies into pits. Some of the bodies were entangled together. They didn't properly take time and bury the people. And then it was like overnight they had disappeared. So there is evidence, archaeological evidence, that there was a mass migration of Semitic people from the land of Egypt. You just don't want to accept it. Next question.
I don't know. Did I do 4 questions or 5 questions? Do
You
I
did
have another
4.
question?
You have one more question.
Okay. So, let's see here. 1 question left. I must be careful. Is it true or false? So this is simple, that there's no, in Egyptian history, to this very day, if you open up an Egyptian history book, for instance, is there any history, Egyptian history, of the Exodus? And if there is, can you give us the reference outside of any biblical source?
This has got, and I'm glad that I have 2 minutes to answer this, but this has got to be probably the most ignorant question Asana could have asked if he would have listened to any part of my opening statement. I gave archaeological evidence from diggings and findings and sites within Egypt from Egyptologists and everything else. What he's trying to say is there any old manuscripts or hieroglyphs that we can go to say, oh yeah, that's what happened, this would happen. And I believe that I've already stated that the letter of Ippaware shows the judgment upon God on the Egypt people. And I also want to quote one more thing. And I just want to leave this last quote, and this is from an Egyptian priest, Manetho. It says, in the reign of Dudamos, God smote the Egyptians. Now, in this state, in this phrase, smote, or God smote the Egyptians, God is singular. Egyptians believed in a plural of gods, not just a singular God, but this Egyptian priest identified a God who smoted Egypt in the reign of Didymos. So yes, to answer your question, there is evidence, and I did give it. You just didn't listen to it. Thank you.
All right. Between the two of you all, there's still 20 minutes and 37 seconds left in
Yeah,
this
we're just going to
session.
do the 5-minute closing, and then we'll open it up to if people want to ask questions at that point.
Well, if I could, let me ask the two of you this. Are we only counting as evidence extra biblical and extra Quranic material?
In my presentation, I wanted to strictly go to the archaeological evidence to display the physical evidence of the Exodus. So that was my intention, and also to try to correlate it with what the Bible was actually stating about what happened and how we can know that these different archaeological findings and evidence correlates into the Exodus from Egypt.
So what I mean by that is that the earliest records that we have of, and I'm just following the criteria of historiography, that we use the earliest testimony, and that can be counted as evidence. Asana, are you saying that you don't count the biblical record as evidence? It has to be something outside of the biblical record that counts as evidence? Is that what you're saying?
Not necessarily. All I'm saying is that even for when people believe in these things, they're not looking in general for external justification for them believe. They believe in what God has provided for them to believe in, and therefore that for most believers is enough. They don't look for archaeological findings to believe in Exodus, period. That's just
Okay,
a
but
fact.
we're not talking about what people believe personally. Like, we're not talking about confessionalism or devotionalism here.
No, actually, that's
We're
what we are talking about, because
we're
I said my point of the whole thing was you cannot prove the Exodus. You have to believe the Exodus. He has
well,
not proven
but
anything about the Exodus whatsoever.
what I'm saying is, if he was to go to the biblical record, he couldn't use that to prove the Exodus as a historical event.
Only through faith, because you can't prove faith of faith. In other words, if he's reading the biblical record, he's believing it by faith. He has no evidence of even what he's reading.
Okay, so his provision of archaeological evidence doesn't count for you.
No, he's saying that he can do it even without the Bible, which I find astonishing, because you can't even find an Exodus story unless you read the Bible first.
I
You
said
even
I
go look
could.
it up.
I said I could do it with the Bible and with physical evidences, and that's exactly what I did today.
So you agree that you can't do any of it without the Bible, right?
Why would I do anything without the Bible when I'm a Christian? Of course, I'm going to
That
resort to the Bible, but with the Bible, we have physical evidence. With the physical evidence and with the Bible, we can have the full story. That's what you as a Muslim don't understand. We have that in the Bible. You don't have that in Islam. You have blind faith.
as I said before, you actually are having blind faith, and you're trying to support your blind faith with anecdotal pieces of these things that you're bringing
All
up
right,
that are
so
not
this isn't part of the debate. Let's get to
that
the
are not
Okay,
directly
solution.
mentioned.
so
You've never directly mentioned the Exodus in any of these findings.
Asana.
None of them.
Asana,
okay,
we're going to start our closings.
all right. So, Chris, you have 5 minutes for your closing statement. Hang on, let me reset my timer. As soon as you start talking, Chris, I'll start your time.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Can you go ahead and mute yourself, Asana, just so we don't have the sound on that side? Thank you very much. And so in doing this, I was going to say I'll mute you. But anyways, in doing the closing statement, I have to revert to try not to name call my opponent. I believe that this debate is probably one of the worst debates that Asana has ever had. He actually denies evidence, even if it is evidence. So, as I said, I believe, and I've told him this, that I believe that the Exodus starts when the Jews have come to the land and they start multiplying. Then we see the slavery. What we need to do is we need to follow the evidence. So when you have a line of evidence, as I've shown, when it comes from the Semitic arrival, then it goes to the multiplication, then it goes to the slavery, then it goes to the judgment, then it goes to the Exodus, and then it goes to the conquest, we have a line of evidence that we can follow. The problem is that Asana just believes that it just didn't happen. Doesn't matter what type of archaeological evidence that can support it, or anything else to this matter. He just simply thinks that as long as he says that I did not supply any evidence, then I didn't. Just that's plain and simple when it comes from Asana. And I think that that's just completely ludicrous. He's trying to say that, I'm going to go back to this because I think it's probably one of the dumbest things that he's actually said, because he actually didn't supply any support for his claim. He said that these people would have been like climbing down a mountain and then going across so far and then climbing back up the other side of the mountain and whatnot. Did he show us the route that Moses would have led the Israelites on out of Egypt? Did he show us where in the Red Sea that it is that deep and that far? Is that what he did, or did he just simply say it? He just simply said it. Now, I want everybody that is listening to this debate today, who actually supplied evidence? Who is the one that is leading with blind faith? Now, blind faith is a very terrible thing. And Asana is looking at it and trying to assume that I'm using blind faith, even though I believe I have an evidence-based faith, is that we do have evidence for what we have. It does not have to be visual evidence, but evidence isn't just visual, isn't just archaeological. You can have an argument and the line of it can be the evidence to support a theory. So the problem here is Asana's never had an actual debate. He's trying to constrain the idea of the Exodus as much as he possibly can without providing any possible information for any of his claims, which he had one claim, and the rest of it, he's just going off the top of his head. What I would honestly do is I would ask Asana to actually look into the evidence that I've provided, and I'll go ahead and I'll send you the evidence via Facebook Messenger, because I am sure that you did not listen to anything that I said in my opening statement. And I also want to point out here that just that quote that I give by the Egyptian priest, Manetho, again, it says, in the reign of Dudamos, God, singular, smote the Egyptians. I want everybody out there to think, did the Egyptians believe in one God, or did they believe in a multiplicity of gods? And at that time, who was the one God? That was Yahweh. So therefore, we have evidence of an Egyptian saying that one God had smote Egyptians in this time frame, and is dated back to the same time frame as what we have the Exodus. So we have all of this information, and Asana just simply says, that's blind faith. Really, Asana? You're the one with blind faith, and I would challenge you to find any type of evidence for anything in your faith. I'm just happy that we as Christians, we have evidence for what our Bible says. And that's the problem with Muslims. They don't have evidence for what their Quran says. They simply have to follow like blind mice.
Time.
Thank you.
I said time about 5 seconds ago, but I realized I was muted. So
It's okay.
Asana can take an extra. He doesn't usually take up all his time anyway. Asana, you have 5 minutes for your closing statement. And
Do I have my other 2 minutes?
yes, you can add.
I probably won't use it, but I want to know the convenience of having it.
You actually have 3 minutes and 5 seconds to add to that. So in your closing statement, go ahead and take 8 minutes, and I'll start as soon as you start speaking.
Okay, I'm ready. So I want everybody to really understand what this conversation was about. I'm looking at even some of the comments that even I see some people made in the back. This conversation was not about, was Israel ever in Egypt? Never doubted that, never said that at all. Nor did I say I doubted anything. I actually said I believe these things by faith. This conversation was not about, did God put judgment upon the Egyptians? Nowhere is that a part of this conversation, dialogue, or debate. I won't try to deface or defame my opponent, which they said the same, but then they actually went ahead and said several demeaning things, but that's fine with me because I understand the nature of the conversation. Now, what I did say, and what he could not refute or provide any, not even an inkling, literally zero, he provided in regards to what I particularly specified after we spoke, which was that he could not provide any inkling of an evidence of 2 million people being transported from one place to the next. When he spoke about the Red Sea, it was astonishing that he was trying to minimize the event when I said that these people would have, if the Red Sea had parted, it would have certainly have been 2 walls of water, which it actually is described like that in the biblical narrative. So if there are 2 magnificent walls on each side, that means there's depth, right? There's depth to a water. It's not a 2 feet shallow. It's not a pond. It's not a swamp. It's an actual sea. So if you cross the sea, and there's miles to go across the sea, and there's depth to go down, that means, as we said before, you would have to take these over probably 2 million people. Eric just buzzed in and said on dry land, but if it was dry land, then why would they be talking about the Egyptians getting stuck in the mud? It wasn't dry, it was muddy. So, but keep that in mind. You have to go down this hill, whether it's 20 feet, 50 feet, 1,000 feet, 2,000 feet. It's a sea. So when you open up the sea, it has depth to it. It has a massive amount of depth, which means you have to go down on one side, travel across it, which is many, many miles, at least 7 in that area. And then you have to come up that same distance up. So like, again, that's 2 million people. We're talking about one night, 2 million people, elderly, babies, carriages, food, supplies, stock, and you have to get it all down that place. The logistics of it will be a logistical horror that will probably take literally months in real time, or at least weeks, to actually do that. Now, I said in the beginning, I believe this happened. I believe because I have faith. If I actually try to go with the evidence, there would be no way to believe such a thing happened. He couldn't tell me how 2 million people made this trek across even the Red Sea. Not to mention, we're talking about going all the way to Mount Sinai. Then we're talking about 2 million people going around the desert for 40 years in circles without leaving a trace, without leaving anything, tents, wagons, wheels, bottles, pottery, nothing. It's zero evidence. So I'm saying, yes, believe what you believe because you have faith. That's why I compared it to the resurrection. You have no, and not even Chris would say he has evidence of the resurrection. He might say he has evidence of the crucifixion, but he would never say, none of you will ever say there's evidence for a resurrection. You believe in it for blind faith. This is why Apostle Paul says, if Christ was not resurrected, then your faith, our preaching is vain and your faith is in vain. He wouldn't have to say if he could say, look, I can show you that he was resurrected. So I'm saying, yeah, embrace your faith, embrace your religion, have faith in your religion, but don't be cocky and arrogant thinking you could run around having evidence. If there was evidence, literal evidence, then we wouldn't have this discussion. Everybody would be like, everybody knows that the Exodus happened because of this, that, and that. Like I said, we don't have to go. If we had a conversation about the existence of pyramids, what we got to do is look. When we see a bunch of pyramids, we say, oh, well, that happened, right? So we can know things like things that are obvious and things that we don't have to like convince people. You want to know about railroad tracks? Go look at the tracks. They're right there, right? So where we have actual evidences of things, there's not a problem. We can even the slavery in America, we could still find like the iron brass, the place where they actually took the slaves and put them on ships, the iron cast of ship of those slaves. We could find old plantations. And that was over a long period of time too. So when you can't find anything, that's zero evidence. So it's just ridiculous. Now, again, with that being said, I believe because I have faith. And anybody who tries to say, oh, I just don't have blind faith, then you don't have faith, because faith is what? I asked Chris to finish that sentence. He never did. Maybe he wasn't listening. What does your Bible say faith is? It's not the hope. It's not the hope. It's not for things seen, right? Nobody has faith in things they see. I don't have faith I'm watching television. I'm watching. I don't have faith that I'm talking to you. I'm talking to you. So when you put that, oh, blind faith, like it's such a horrible thing, then you don't seem to understand that is what you actually have. Blind faith. You haven't met God. You haven't seen God. You haven't spoken to God. No, you have faith. You don't have any evidence. So with that being said, how much time I got left, DL? DL?
You have 35 seconds.
All right, I'm done. Thank you, DL.
Okay. Thanks to the both of you guys. Since we have 17 minutes and 31 seconds left over from the open discussion section of the debate, I'm going to open that up to the audience if they want to ask either one of you two participants or debaters a question. So raise your hand if you guys got a question either for Chris Claus or Asana.
Or if you're a co-host, you can just go ahead and unmute yourself as well. We do have Ibn here. Ibn, just go ahead and type in the chat if you had any questions or not.
Well, they don't have the ability to raise their hand on here.
For Asana. All right. Go ahead, ask to unmute you. You can unmute and ask Asana.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, a question for Asana. Asana, did you know that Chris had a different definition of Exodus, or was it like because before the debate we talked, the topic was about the Exodus, but my understanding was the Exodus is that event where Moses led his people across the sea. Did you know that Chris had a different definition of the Exodus?
No, and in fact, I have never even heard of any other definition about Moses, other than Moses taking his people and exiting out of Egypt to across the Red Sea into Mount Sinai. His definition was something to be desired for, because I've never heard of such a thing ever in my life. And so I thought that was very kind of shady, but I don't, like I said, I don't know his motives, and maybe he did. I mean, he counted Jericho. Jericho was with Joshua. I mean, how do you do that? To me, so I just didn't understand why he did that. But you know, like I said, I won't say he's doing anything nefarious. Maybe he just doesn't understand. That's my answer.
Excellent. So I'll do a follow-up for that as well. The problem here, Ibn, is that Asana just can't make assumptions without qualifying those assumptions. We've been talking roughly for about 2 days in the Facebook Messenger, as you've been able to see. Not once has he ever said that I must provide evidence of the crossing of the Red Sea. He never identified the Exodus as that. Throughout all the conversations that we had in Facebook Messenger, as I said, I would provide physical evidence for the biblical Exodus.
DL?
Is exactly what I said. I have up to 2 minutes. Sorry that you didn't take your time, Asana. Now, the problem here is that I actually gave Asana. Hold on here. I'm finishing my question. Don't jump in here.
We had no rule where the person asked.
All right, so I got to keep talking here because I got to be able to finish my time. You're not allowed to cut me off.
We had no rule. Wait. Listen to.
Again, am I going to get to finish what I'm saying?
Could you please let me respond and stop trying to mute me?
No, because he's asked a question. You respond, and I get a chance to respond.
You do not. Then we move on. You do not. What are you talking about? Somebody asked me a question. then when they ask you a question, you're supposed to answer.
All right, so this is I'm gonna pause the time. We still have 14 minutes and 44 seconds left. So the rule, we didn't have any rule for this session, Asana.
Well, actually, we did, because what you
we
said was people were going to ask us, either of us questions, right?
That's correct.
So that means if Ibn said the question is for Asana.
That's fine, but
So
but
once
if the
Asana
but if the other debater wants to add something, they can.
That
Now,
doesn't make sense. That means the question is that means the question wouldn't be for me.
Hang on, Asana. You answered him.
Yes, and that doesn't mean he can follow up my answer. It doesn't make any sense.
But if he wants to follow up, he can. Now, if you want to
But-
make rules about how much time he has,
I
I would say, because the question was directed at you, answered the question.
What I'm saying,
I would
every
say,
debate-
hang on, Asana. I would say that you would get 2 minutes to answer the question, and Chris Claus, because he wasn't asked the question, should get at least a minute to add to it.
I've never seen in the debate where you get somebody
Asana,
asks somebody a question,
Go
and then the
look
person
on
gets to
any
also
debate
do that.
on YouTube.
I have, and that never has happened.
You're wrong.
Yes, it has, Asana.
Well, we don't.
The person who was not answered the question has at least a minute to throw in their 5 cents. Okay. So you answer. It's not like Chris came in and cut you off. You finished responding to it.
Well, okay. Well, I wasn't aware that someone can ask.
Okay. That's the way.
And then you can answer their question too. That doesn't make any sense.
That's the way it'll be. If anybody asks Chris Claus a question, he'll get 2 minutes to answer the question, and you'll have a minute to respond.
Why is he getting the last of my? I don't understand why he would get the last of my answer.
Asana, it is the way that debates are done.
That's not how they work.
If you
I've
don't
never seen that.
understand that, then that's
It doesn't
not our
work like
fault.
that.
You'll get that same opportunity.
It doesn't work like that.
You'll get that same opportunity, Asana. Okay. So, Chris, were you done with your response to Ibn?
Yeah, because he interrupted me and I lost my train of thought and I forgot what I was going to say, which is normally what Asana likes to do. Go ahead.
Okay. So, is there any other questions for any other panelists?
Eric's got one.
Eric's got one. Eric.
I have one for Asana. Actually, I have two for Asana. Number one, I want to know who does your ceilings there in Oregon. I mean, that's like the most perfect ceiling paint job I've ever seen in my life.
That's off the subject, Eric.
All right, sorry.
It's not germane to the topic.
Okay, sorry. No, I was. I'm listening. I'm sorry I got in here late, but I didn't hear Chris's full presentation. But I'm certain, based on my conversation with him, that he presented you all kinds of what we would call, and I wouldn't call them anecdotal facts, but facts that demonstrate a pattern of evidence or a whole bunch of evidences that contribute to the existence of the nation of Israel in Egypt, and the fact that now there are in Israel at a later time. Wouldn't that indicate that at some point in time that there had to be an Exodus as described in the book of Exodus? And when you have a book, when you have a debate on the book of on the Exodus, that of course is naturally going to include all of the events that lead up to it and all of the events after it. I would think that that would be a logical conclusion. So my answer, my question is, with that preface, is do you accept any of those facts that was presented by Chris this evening as contributing towards a historical exodus from Egypt? And if not, okay, let me. Sorry, and if not, why not? I'll mute it myself.
The first thing is, I actually don't know if anything he said was facts. He's given me some data that he got. I don't know. Of course, I haven't verified that data. There's no reason for me necessarily to question what he's saying, but it certainly hasn't been verified to me whether that data is accurate or even reliable or trustworthy. There's no reason for me to accept any of it. But even if I did, like I said, all the data that he provided to me was inconsequential to what I was referring to or talking about. And yes, he did know we were talking about the Red Sea and going to Mount Sinai, because I said it. I even before we did the debate, I actually gave him a article or whatever about the Red Sea and how it was be almost impossible for the Red Sea and going across the desert. Everything I've ever said during this whole thing about this, I was saying those were the things that you had no evidence whatsoever at all. I didn't say anything about evidence about Israelites living in Egypt. I said nothing about no evidence about Jericho. I didn't say anything about there being no Semitic people ever dying in Egypt. These are all things that he added that to me, it was like things that maybe make him feel better or something. But to me, it was all inconsequential because till this day, all this time we've been on this phone, and he pretty much has admitted at this point, he has no actual evidence in regards to the time they were allowed to leave Egypt to Sinai of 2 million people crossing this sea and going to Mount Sinai with there's nothing after 40 years in desert, no pottery, nothing, not a wagon wheel, nothing, no bones, nothing at all. And in that Red Sea, of all those people going across that Red Sea, there's I mean literally nothing, or army being in the Red Sea where also.
Chris Claus, you have a minute.
Thank you very much. Excellent. Hopefully Asana doesn't try to blurt in here again. So the problem here, Eric, is Asana doesn't really understand what evidence truly is. So what I did is I went to where the Semitic people started being found in ancient Egyptian archaeology. And I showed the progression from the Israelites into Egypt and out of Egypt and into the conquest of Jericho. So the only normal conclusion that we can come from all of the evidence put together is that the Exodus actually happened from Egypt. But the problem with Asana is he tries to lower the scope of evidence so he can try to hope that everybody has the same blind faith as him. Now, he went on blind faith before, but blind faith is believing in something without knowing if it's true.
Okay, Asana, I'm gonna warn you that if you avoid answering questions again, I'm gonna have to boot you out the room. Okay.
I didn't avoid answering the question. What are you talking about?
Yes, you did. Eric asked you about who did your ceilings, and you ran from the question.
Okay.
And we need you to answer the questions.
Okay. Well, I don't know that answer.
Okay. All right. So, as long as you're honest about it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Are there any other questions?
I think we're good on that. I don't think it's going to go any further. Basically, Asana's thrown up the block that if I don't present physical evidence that what he wants me to produce to him, then he's just going to deny the whole thing. Where I lined out a long list of evidences that he's just simply throwing under the bus, just simply because he doesn't like it. So I don't see there any further reason to continue the debate with him, honestly.
Okay, so let me ask a couple of questions if you panelists don't mind. Are you saying, Asana, that you find the conquest of Canaan as a separate issue from the Exodus itself?
Yes.
Okay, fair enough. But you would say that, logically speaking, the reason why the children of Israel ended up on the other side of the Jordan to enter into Canaan was because they came out of the Exodus.
That wouldn't, being that would be a separate issue, it would not actually entail. Now, keep in mind, like I said, and I've said it about 5 times, I actually believe what the Bible says. I just say I believe it by faith, not by anything that we could point to and say that's why, because we really wouldn't know how they got there or how they did the conquest in reality, because there isn't. Just because, that's like saying just because, for instance, that blacks are in America, that somehow we did a conquest and took over America and that's why we're here, when it was opposite and we were actually brought here slaves. So the presence of somebody being in another area has nothing to do with how or why It just has to do with that they were. So yes, where they got to Canaan at some point, and they did take over portions of it. However, even when you in the actual historical sense, in the time of Exodus, Egypt owned Canaan too. They actually ran Canaan, and they dominated there too. So
Okay,
they
but what I'm trying to
that's a
say
fact.
is
That's a fact. Yes, it is.
what I'm trying to say is that you also keep injecting the resurrection into the situation.
Are you asking me a different question? Wait. Are you asking
Well,
me a different
no. Well, what I'm saying is when it comes to something like the resurrection, your top scholars like Gary Habermas, he uses an evidentialist approach, okay, a cumulative case approach, to where he's saying that the best explanation for the empty tomb is the resurrection. It's more plausible than any other answer that can be given based off of the evidence. Chris Claus
what evidence?
wait. Chris Claus. But hang on. Just understand my point that I was trying to make is that you have.
Well, you just said it was an empty tomb. That's not evidence of anything.
But what I'm saying is, I just got through saying it's the why was the tomb empty? We're gonna use a cumulative case approach, an evidentialist approach, and it's going to show that the best explanation for the tomb being empty was the resurrection. But we're not discussing that. We're Asana, stick with me. What I'm saying is, you brought up the resurrection numerous times throughout this debate.
Yes.
So I'm just telling you that that's the same approach that Chris Claus is taking to the Exodus.
Well,
he's
it's terrible.
But hang on, he's just walking back. He's in the snow. He's gotten to a place, and he's just backtracking. So he's going backwards to Jericho. We have forensic evidence. We have you have the walls of Jericho. I believe there's evidence of the walls being burned as well. That's
not the argument.
Okay, you have Ostraka, you have material evidence at these locations. Then but what I'm saying, he's backtracking to the Exodus, which is what a historian would do, is what an archaeologist would do. So what I'm saying is, what you dismiss as evidence is evidence for somebody who works in the field of history and archaeology.
I didn't dismiss the evidence of what he said about Jericho and what he said about a lot of things. I said this is inconsequential to this particular debate.
Asana, I used a cumulative case to prove it.
But it's still, like I said, there is no.
And it is the best example. The best example of all the evidence that I gave is that the Exodus actually happened. That is the best example of all the evidence that I have gave.
You didn't give example of an Exodus. You gave an example of different events, and then you say, because this event over here.
Asana, are you listening? Are you listening? I gave a cumulative case, as he just said.
It's a non sequitur.
Oh my
God! It's not a non sequitur.
Yes, it is.
This is why I cannot talk to this guy. He's not even half smart.
Asana, do you study history?